You copy an object. The copy gets the object's copyable values. And that raises the question, what does this term mean, copyable values? So let's take a look at a sample card. Can anybody tell me the categories or a category of copyable values of this card? Nick has very emphatically said mana cost. Eli, maybe try closing it and reopening it and see if that helps. Set symbol is not a copyable value. Good try. So this is the one usually people name first. Name is one of the copyable values of Krenko. Mana cost, as Nick pointed out. Type, subtype, and supertype are all copyable values. Power and toughness, of course, because Krenko is a creature. The mana cost, or color indicator if it has no mana cost, is a copyable value. Color is not directly a copyable value. It's derived from the mana cost or color indicator. And similarly, the rules text is a copyable value, and then the abilities the card has are derived from the rules text. Mana value or converted mana cost is not a copyable value. That is derived from the mana cost or lack thereof. It's important for you to know that any characteristics that are created by copy effects become part of the object's copyable values. So for example, here is a creature, phantasmal image, that has a copy effect. It enters the battlefield as a copy of something, but it gains an additional ability when it does so. So this ability, when this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, sacrifice it, is also Phantasmal Image's, one of Phantasmal Image's copyable values. If something copies the object that Phantasmal Image is, it will also copy that additional ability. On the other hand, any characteristics created by non-copy effects do not change the object's copyable values. So if you cast Giant Growth on a creature and then copy it, the copy is not going to get the additional +3/+3. First, we're going to discuss copying permanents. And I'm going to show you some examples. And I'll have questions for you along the way. I always encourage you to at least try answering questions, even if you're not going to put the answer into the chat, because it'll help you learn the material and help you sort of organize your thinking around it. So here is a creature, Halpak of Estwald. This is the back side of a transforming double-faced card. The front side is Villagers of Estwald. But we're only looking at the back side right now. So if you clone this Halpak of Estwald, what is the result? Is it Villagers of Estwald, Halpak of Estwald, or something else? And if you want to vote, just put the number of your answer into the chat. And if you do see any lag, please let me know. I don't know how much I can do about it, but at least I'll be informed. Indeed, it is indeed Halpak of Estwald, because the copyable values of this creature are exactly what you see here. Next example uses a wolf token, which is normally a 2/2, except this wolf token has a +1/+1 counter. So it is a 3/3. And if you clone this wolf token, what is the result? Is it a wolf token that's 2/2, a wolf token with a +1/+1 counter, or a 3/3 wolf token? Eli, you're getting ahead of me. You have 2 votes for number 1 so far. The answer is, in fact, number one. The counter is not created by copy effect, so it doesn't get copied. And the copyable values of this wolf are the 2, 2, which is in this case printed on the card. I want to point out, as Eli was getting to, token is not a copyable characteristic. A card could copy something else that isn't a token, and if the copy is a token, it's still a token. Likewise, if you copy something that's a token, as in this case with something like clone, the result is not a token. Token is not a copyable value. It's not a super type. It's just a descriptor of what the card or what the object physically is. This is a fencing ace. And if you cast jump on it, it becomes a flying fencing ace. So if you take this flying fencing ace and clone it, what do you get? You get a regular non-flying fencing ace, who may or may not be envious of flying. Similarly, if you take this fencing ace and put a bone splitter on it, you get a 3-1 fencing ace. Now, unlike jump, the effect of bone splitter does not wear off until the end of the turn. But still, if you copy this 3-1 fencing ace with a clone, you're going to get a regular fencing ace, because the bone splitter's effect is not a copy effect, so it does not change fencing ace's copyable values. Let's take this white knight, which has protection from black, and cast Mind Bend on it, and I'll give you a moment to read Mind Bend because it hasn't been in print since 10th edition. And you use Mind Bend to change the white knight's protection to protection from blue. And then you take this protection from blue white knight and you clone it. What's the result? Do you get a regular white knight with protection from black, a white knight with protection from blue, or maybe your clone is just a 0/0 shapeshifter that can't copy something that has protection from blue, so it's just a 0/0. And indeed, the answer is you get a white knight with protection from black, because even though the effect of Mind Bend doesn't wear off, it's still not a copy effect and therefore does not change white knight's copyable values. The clone ability is not targeted, so it can copy something that has protection from blue. This is a Fleecemane line, which you may recall from Theros Era Standard. And if you activate its first ability, it becomes a monstrous Fleecemane line, which has a +1/+1 counter. And if you take this monstrous Fleecemane line and clone it, what do you get? And this time you have 4 options. Your first option is a monstrous Fleecemane lion with a +1/+1 counter. Your second choice is a monstrous Fleecemane lion without a counter. Third choice is a non-monstrous Fleecemane lion without a counter. And the final choice is a non-monstrous Fleecemane lion with a +1/+1 counter. The correct answer is number 3. You get a non-monstrous Fleecemane lion without a counter because monstrosity is not a copy effect. Therefore, it does not change Fleecemane lion's copyable values. You might feel that everything so far is somewhat repetitive and simple, but I'm giving you the simple stuff at the beginning to sort of help you get used to it before we start getting to some more complicated stuff. So here's a Celestial Colonnade. And one of the great things about Celestial Colonnade is you can activate its last ability and turn it into a creature. and it becomes a 4/4 blue-white elemental that has flying and vigilance. So if you clone the Celestial Colonnade, what do you get? Do you get a 4/4 flying vigilance blue-white elemental creature, or do you get the non-creature version? Ryan points out that the clone is going to enter the battlefield tapped. This is true. All of these cards are going to appear to you as untapped because it is about 10 times easier to read the cards if they're upright than if they're on their sides. So you can take for granted that anything that's supposed to be tapped, you can consider it to be tapped, even if it doesn't appear tapped. But I do appreciate the precision of the answer. So yes, the answer is number 2. The effect that turns Celestial Colonnade into a creature is not a copy effect, so it does not change the card's copyable values. So you have this clone, which is itself a creature card, but ends up being a land when its copy effect is applied. So let's take this 4/4 Celestial Colonnade, and this time, instead of using clone, we have this Artisan of Forms, which is already on the battlefield and has an ability that whenever you target it with a spell, you can have it copy something. So you're going to target with a spell and have it copy Celestial Colonnade. What's the result? Well, we know it's not a creature from the previous question, but is it a regular Celestial Colonnade, or what I'm going to term the heroic Celestial Colonnade that has this additional ability? It is, in fact, the heroic version of Celestial Colonnade, because Artisan Forms' copy ability says that it becomes a copy of her target creature and gains this ability referring to the heroic ability. So now that we have this Artisan of Forms, this is currently masquerading as a Celestial Colonnade, and you play Vesuva and have it copy Artisan of Forms, what is the result? Yes, the result is a tapped card. You don't have to mention that it's tapped. Do you get the regular Celestial Colonnade or the heroic Celestial Colonnade with Vesuva? Jeffrey, I think I'm the one asking the questions here. You get the heroic Celestial Colonnade because the heroic ability is created by a copy effect, by Artisan of Forms' copy effect. So therefore, it does change the card's copyable values, which are not just the copyable values of the Celestial Colonnade, but the heroic ability instead. So when Vesuva copies it, it becomes the Celestial Colonnade with the heroic ability. So here's this greater sandworm. And when you're trying to deal with the greater sandworm, one effective way to deal with it is to summon the greater sandworm's evil twin. And the result is going to be a greater sandworm with the evil twin's ability, because evil twin's ability is a copy effect. So therefore, the ability it adds is also part of that card's copyable values, which means when you copy the evil twin with Phyrexian Metamorph, you don't get the artifact version of Greater Sandworm, which is what you might expect. You get the additional ability of the Evil Twin, which is a part of the copyable values of the card. So you get an artifact Greater Sandworm that has the Evil Twin's ability. Speaking of Greater Sandworm, suppose you have Greater Sandworm and you also have Essence of the Wild, and they're both sitting on the battlefield, and you play Evil Twin, and you say Evil Twin is going to copy Greater Sandworm. What is the result? And you have some options here. You have 4 options. Number 1 is just the regular Greater Sandworm. Number 2 is Greater Sandworm's Evil Twin. Number 3 is Essence the Wild. And number 4 is Essence the Wild's Evil Twin. And if you need me to go back to the previous slides, you can see the cards. Just let me know. I'm pretty impressed if anybody was playing Greater Sandworm and Essence the Wild in a standard deck. Very impressed. I mean, considering that they were never actually in standard together. That's what makes it so impressive. Anyone else want to type an answer? So let's look at what's going on here. The answer is number 3, you get a regular Essence the Wild. So there are 2 copy effects that could apply to this object that's entering the battlefield. One is coming from Evil Twin and one is coming from Essence the Wild. If you apply them in this order, then Essence the Wild's copy ability or copy effect is going to override Evil Twin's copy effect. Because when you have multiple copy effects that are applied in sequence on an object, the more recent copy effect will overwrite the older one. So there will be no trace of the Evil Twin, it will just be an Essence the Wild. Suppose you apply them in the other order. You say, I'm going to apply Essence the Wild first, get that out of the way, so that then I can get the Evil Twin's ability. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite work that way. You actually end up with an Essence the Wild this way also. The reason is that once you've applied Essence the Wild's copy effect, that card no longer has the ability to use, no longer has Evil Twin's copy ability. That replacement effect cannot be applied to copy something else because it's just an Essence the Wild that's entering the battlefield. Any questions on this before I move on? Okay, this is the Scarab God, and if you were judging or playing during Amonkhet Standard, you probably are familiar with this card because it has a neat ability where you can create a token that's a copy of a card you exile from graveyard, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. So if you exile something like Fencing Ace, then you're going to end up with a 4/4 black zombie Fencing Ace that has the rest of Fencing Ace's characteristics. That's pretty straightforward, right? And if you copy this Fencing Ace with a clone, you get a 4/4 black zombie Fencing Ace because the 4/4 and the black and the zombie were all characteristics created by the copy effect that created this token. So they are part of this creature's copyable values. But suppose instead of copying the very simple, straightforward Fencing Ace, you say, I'm going to exile this clone that's in the graveyard and use that to copy Fencing Ace. So do you get a regular 1/1 white Fencing Ace, or do you get a black 4/4 zombie Fencing Ace? And I'll go back so you can see this interaction and decide what the answer is. Some of you might be wishing we were still with the Bone Splitter Fencing Ace questions. I did mention that it was going to get a little more complicated. The answer is you get a regular Fencing Ace. And we again have 2 copy effects, and it might look like they can be applied in either order, but that's actually not the case. Because the second one here, the clone's copy effect, that's not even relevant until you know that the card you are exiling is clone, the card that you're creating a copy of, a token copy of, is a clone. So first you must apply Scarab God's copy effect. Then you apply clone's copy effect. And as we've established before, the second copy effect that's applied in sequence is going to overwrite the previous copy effect. So the only copy effect that will be on this object will be the clone, which is copying fencing ace directly as is. So we're going to go back to Artisan of Forms. And this time, Artisan of Forms copies a meddling mage that is already on the battlefield and is naming Fatal Push. And this time, you have 5 options. And you can think of them as going sequentially across 1, 2 on the top row, 3, 4, 5 on the bottom row. The top row are non-heroic meddling mages, and the bottom row are heroic meddling mages. The first column are meddling mages naming nothing. The second column are meddling mages naming Fatal Push. And the third column is a meddling mage that doesn't even have the ability to name a card. So which of these does the Artisan of Forms become? The answer is number 3. The meddling mage is a heroic meddling mage because that is what Artisan of Forms copy effect does. It is not naming a card because it never entered the battlefield with this ability. So it never got the chance to name a card, and it doesn't copy the card name that was chosen with the previous meddling mage because that's not a copy effect, so it does not change meddling mage's copyable values. Again, with Artisan of Forms, this time becomes a copy of Primal Clay, and when Primal Clay entered the battlefield, the controller chose to make it a 2/2 flying creature. So here are your choices. Now, all of these are heroic Primal Clays, but I didn't write that in. But you know that they are all heroic because we've seen Artisan of Forms so many times. So your first option is you get to choose which of the 3 options within Primal Clay, 3/3, 2/2, or 1/6. Number 2 is those stars at the bottom right are undefined, so it's a 0/0 and therefore dead. Number 3 is a 2/2 with flying. Number 4 is a 2/2 without flying. The answer is number 3. It's a 2/2 with flying, and there's one somewhat obscure rule that I haven't presented to you yet because it is obscure. And that is if a card has, as it enters the battlefield or as it's turned face up, abilities that set its power and toughness, those actually modify its copyable values. And any other characteristics that come along, like flying, also get included into its copyable values. The number of cards this actually affects is very small. And I want to point out this is meddling mage is not does not fall into this category because the as it enters the battlefield ability of meddling mage does not set its power and toughness. It was just for the duration of that one question that we were not friends, Ryan. Now we're friends again. This is the back of a magic card. And when it's on the battlefield, it is a face-down magic card, most commonly from being a morph or a manifest. And because it is a face-down magic card, well, you tell me what its copyable characteristics are. These are the characteristics of a face-down card. It's a 2/2 creature with no name, no color, no subtype. And those are also its copyable values. Because the rule for face-down cards says specifically that those are its copyable values. So when you clone it, you get exactly this, what you see here. You get a 2/2 creature with no name, no color, no subtype. So suppose you take this clone and you use Ixodor, who is the best friend of all face-down creatures, and you say, Ixodor, please turn this card face up. what do you get? As Ryan points out, it already is face up. So Ixodor can't even target it with its ability because it's not a face down card. Being face down or face up is a status, just like being tapped or untapped is a status. It's not a copyable value. So if you copy a face down card, the copy is not face down, just like if you copy a tapped card with something normal like a clone, if you copy a tapped card, the copy is not tapped. So we're going to take this face down card and I'm going to show you the front side. It's actually an Exalted Angel, but right now it's face down. So it's just a 2/2 creature with no name, no color, and no subtype. And with this face down Exalted Angel, we're going to use Cytoshape. It's a little unusual for copy ability because unlike clone, which you're probably familiar with, and certainly after seeing it used so many times here, you're familiar with it. Unlike clone, it makes one creature into a copy of another creature. So we're using Cytoshape to turn this face-down Exalted Angel into a Crossend Colossus. So the result is still a face-down creature because being face down is a status and doesn't get copied, and being face up is a status that doesn't get copied. So we know that it is currently a 2/2 creature with no name, no color, no subtype. My question is, what happens when you want to turn it face up? Because if you turn it face up, if you look at the face, the front face, you'll see, or the game will see, that it's a Crossend Colossus, even though right now it's face down. But because Exalted Angel has a printed morph cost of 2 white, you should be able to turn it face up for that, right? Well, actually, no. Its morph cost is what you see when you reveal it to everyone. So when you reveal it as the first step of turning it face up, you'll see it is a Crossend Colossus, which has a morph cost of 6 green. And therefore, if you want to turn it face up, you pay that morph cost, the 6 green. Suppose instead you Cytoshape this face-down Exalted Angel into a Fencing Ace. It's still a face-down creature, but it cannot be turned face up because when you reveal it to try to turn it face up, what you're revealing is a Fencing Ace which has no morph cost, and therefore there's no way to use its non-existent morph cost to turn it face up. Any questions on copying and morphs before I move on? I mean, Ixodor can still turn a Fencing Ace face up. You know, you just need something like that. I see a couple of people typing. Break Open is the card you're thinking of, Jeffrey, and actually only turns your opponent's cards face up. You cannot use it on your own. Before we go back to morph cards, we're going to take a little break to look at Mere Welder. This Mere Welder has 2 abilities, and its first ability, exile this Ginger Brute. So currently, Mere Welder is exiling Ginger Brute and has all activated abilities of Ginger Brute. But suppose we use this Cytoshape to turn Mere Welder into a copy of Nightveil Spectre. Now it is a Nightveil Spectre exiling Ginger Brute. Can you cast Ginger Brute? Because Nightveil Spectre says you may play cards exiled with Nightveil Spectre. And indeed, you cannot. Because Nightveil Spectre and Mere Welder both have what are called linked abilities, where the first ability exiles something and the second ability refers to these exiled cards, and it specifically refers to cards exiled with the first ability. So because Ginger Brute was exiled with Mere Welder's first ability, not Nightveil Spectre's first ability, it's only linked to Mere Welder's second ability and not Nightveil Spectre's second ability. So back to these double face cards. This is Ancient of the Equinox, which is the back side of Autumnal Gloom. And here is your only non-copy question of the presentation. What is the mana value of Ancient of the Equinox? It's nothing to do with copy effects. We'll be getting back to some copy effects real quick, though. It is 3, because 3 is the mana value of the front face of Ancient of the Equinox. Suppose you clone this Ancient of the Equinox. What is the mana value of the copy of Ancient of the Equinox? It is, in fact, 0. Suppose, similarly, with Cytoshape Avacyn the Purifier, which is the backside of Archangel Avacyn, and make it copy Ancient of the Equinox. So now instead of using a front face of a card like clone to copy the back face of a card, we're turning the back face of one card into the back face of another card. So we have 2 Ancient of the Equinox now, and they're both identical, right? Well, actually, they're not identical, because this one has a converted mana cost or mana value of 0. And the reason is that any copy of the back face of a transforming double face card always has a mana value of 0. I also want to mention mutate, because the mutate rules create another wrinkle on copy effects. Mutate creates a merged permanent, and the result of this merging changes the copyable values of the card. So when you have Cloud Piercer and Gingerbrute merged from Cloud Piercer's mutate ability, depending on which card is on top of the stack, it might be named Gingerbrute and be a 1/1, or be named Cloud Piercer and be a 5/4. But in either case, it's going to have all the abilities of both cards. And when you take this merged Gingerbrute and copy it with, say, Artisan Reforms, you get the heroic Gingerbrute that has all the abilities of Gingerbrute and all the abilities of Cloud Piercer. And because it is actually an Artisan Reforms, it has the heroic ability as well. And these are all its copyable values. Similarly, if you merge Cloud Piercer onto an animated Celestial Colonnade, depending on which card's on top, once that animation effect wears off, you may end up with a land named Celestial Colonnade or a 5/4 creature named Cloud Piercer. In either case, it's going to have all the abilities of both of those cards, and those are all its copyable values. So here's, again, Artisan Reforms copying the merged Cloud Piercer that was merged with Celestial Colonnade, and you have a heroic Cloud Piercer that has the abilities of Celestial Colonnade. So this example is going to sort of bring some of these rules about copying permanents together into one question. Some. Alice is playing Ned. Alice has these 4 creatures and some other creatures as well, because she's going to need those other creatures, as you'll see. She has a face-down creature, which is a 2/2. She has a Celestial Colonnade. She has a Smuggler's Copter, and she has a Progenitus. And Ned, poor defenseless Ned, has only a tapped Blinkmoth Nexus. So Alice sees that Ned is quite exposed and says, Ned, I'm going to animate my Smuggler's Copter and animate my Celestial Colonnade and attack you with everything. Ned has a trick up his sleeve, and he activates Blinkmoth Nexus's ability to turn it into a creature. And Alice says, Ned, what are you doing? That Blinkmoth Nexus is still tapped. You cannot block with it. Ned casts Mirrorweave, targeting his Blinkmoth Nexus. How much damage does he take? Keep in mind, Ned still has no other creatures. He cannot block anything. There's nothing else he can do in this combat except suck up whatever damage is coming to him. But how much damage is that? This isn't going well for Ned. I mean, I would definitely agree with that. We have one answer. This is my second standard deck. So it looks like we have a 2, a 7. Ryan had an answer and then deleted it. Anyone else want to try answering this question? We have a 2, an 8, and a not 2. Well, let's break this down one attacking creature at a time. So first, we'll look at the progenitus. So the progenitus has protection from everything. However, protection from everything does not actually protect it against Mirrorweave, because protection just means it can't be targeted, can't be damaged, can't be blocked, can't be attached. So none of those things is something that Mirrorweave is doing. Mirrorweave is still going to turn it into a copy of Blinkmoth Nexus. And as we saw earlier, Blinkmoth Nexus's copyable values do not include the fact that it is currently animated as a creature, because that is a non-copy effect. So what you see right now on your screen are the copyable values of Blinkmoth Nexus, and that is what Progenitus becomes. Because it is no longer a creature, it is removed from combat, and it will deal no damage. Next up, we have the Smuggler's Copter, which is currently crewed to be a 3/3. So it too becomes a Blinkmoth Nexus. However, unlike Progenitus, there is an existing effect on this object, and the existing effect doesn't go away. Just like if you have giant growth something and then you Mirrorweave it, that +3/+3 still sticks around and gives it +3/+3. So the Blinkmoth Nexus has the crew effect on it as well, which changes it into a creature. However, when something is crewed, its power and toughness are determined by what are printed in the bottom right, because every vehicle has a power and toughness. And that is not the case for Blinkmoth Nexus. It has nothing printed on it. So this crew effect doesn't know what its power and toughness are supposed to be. And because its power and toughness are undefined, they default to 0/0. So it dies. And because it dies, it is removed from combat and deals no damage. So far, Ned's looking pretty good, right? He's got no damage from the Progenitus, got no damage from the Smuggler's Copter. Let's see what's up next. We have this 4/4 Celestial Colonnade, which is also a Blinkmoth Nexus. And just like Smuggler's Copter, it has an existing effect on it. And that effect turns it into a 4/4 blue-white elemental with flying and vigilance. So this is a 4/4 creature that is still attacking Ned, and therefore it deals 4 damage. Finally, we have the face-down creature. So the front side of the face-down creature is a Blinkmoth Nexus, a non-creature Blinkmoth Nexus. But it is currently face down, and therefore it is a 2/2 creature with no name, no color, and no subtype, and it deals 2 damage. If it was turned face up, it would stop being a creature, but it's currently face down. So in total, Ned takes 6 damage. Any questions about this scenario? Mirrorweave is a hell of a drug. Now we're going to talk about copying spells. So the first question is, what are a spell's copyable values? Well, similarly to what we saw with Krenko, name, mana cost, type, subtype, super type if there was one. Power and toughness don't matter for instants and sorceries. However, before we get back to that, mana cost or color indicator and rules text, just like Krenko. And there are actually spells with copyable values of power and toughness, creature spells, but we'll see that later on. So let's look at some basic scenarios. Here's Alice playing Ned. Alice casts Lightning Bolt, targeting Ned's 2/2 wolf token. Ned casts Reverberate to make a copy of Lightning Bolt. And what are his options for the copy? Can he have the copy target the wolf? Can he have the copy target Alice? Can he have the copy target himself? The answer to all of these is yes. He can have this copy target anything because Reverberate says you may choose new targets for the copy. This card, Altar's Reap, has an additional cost of sacrificing a creature. So if you copy it with Reverberate, do you have to sacrifice another creature for the copy? Just you can put yes or no in the Discord chat. You do not have to sacrifice another creature for the copy. Suppose instead of using Reverberate, you have Altar's Reap imprinted on Isochron Scepter. Do you have to sacrifice another creature for the copy? The answer is yes. And before we look at why, I have another pair of questions for you. This time, instead of Altar's Reap, we're using Celestina Charm, which is a modal spell. So if you copy Celestina Charm with Reverberate, can you pick whatever mode you want? The answer is no. Suppose you have Celestina Charm imprinted on Isochron Scepter. Can you pick whatever mode you want? Answer is yes, you can. And I want to look at Isochron Scepter specifically. Isochron Scepter says you may copy the exiled card and then cast it, whereas Reverberate copies a spell. And when you have a copy of a card, it is created in whatever zone the card is in this case, exile, and then follows the normal process for casting a spell, which means put it on the stack, making choices, and so forth. Those choices include modes, targets, value of X. Also, any additional costs, such as sacrificing a creature with Altar's Reap, must be paid when you are copying a card and casting it. So here's Conqueror's Pledge, which has been kicked, so it was going to create 12 soldiers. And if you copy it with Reverberate, how many soldiers does the copy get? Does the copy make? Do you get 6 soldiers, 12 soldiers, 18 soldiers, or maybe no soldiers at all? Or maybe some other number entirely? It makes 12 if it was kicked, 6 if it was not kicked. Right, the answer is you get 12 soldiers. The reason is, whenever you have a copy of a spell or ability, it copies not only the characteristics of the spell or ability, but also all decisions that were made for it. That includes modes, targets, value of X, additional or alternative costs, and so forth. So, on that note, here is Pyrotechnics, which Alice is casting on Ned. Now, Ned has a 2/2 boar token, so she needs 2 damage to kill the token, and it's going to put the other 2 damage on Ned. Ned thinks this is a grand idea, but since Alice only has a 1/1 token, he's going to do just 1 damage to the token and put the other 3 damage on Alice. Do you like this? As Jeffrey says, this is illegal because one of the choices made when casting a spell such as Pyrotechnics is how to divide the damage. So Reverberate allows Ned to change the targets of the copy, but does not allow Ned to change the distribution of the damage in the copy. Since the original divided damage 2 and 2, the copy must also divide damage 2 and 2. And as I mentioned earlier, creature spells have a power on top of this, and we now have a way to copy permanent spells, creature spells, artifact spells, and so forth. Suppose you use Lithoform Engine's last ability to copy the Curse of Death's Hold spell that you are enchanting your opponent with. What you get is a token copy of Curse of Death's Hold, but it must enchant the same player, because, as we saw earlier, when you copy a spell, it copies all decisions that were made for it, and aura spells are targeted. So you must copy that decision of a target. Whatever the original spell is targeting, the copy of the spell must also target. Most of the time when you're copying spell, that's not an issue because most effects that get you that, like reverberate, allow you to change the target. But Lithoform Engine's ability does not allow you to change the target. So the target must remain the same. I also want to point out that this particular ability is not creating a token. So if you have an effect like Akeem that triggers when tokens are created, it will not trigger. And if you have an effect like Anointed Procession, which modifies events that create tokens, it does not modify the event where Lithoform Engine copies the permanent spell. So we have two final questions to look at what you have learned so far. Alice casts Fling, sacrificing a 2/2 wolf token and targeting Ned. Ned casts Reverberate, targeting Fling and targeting Alice with the copy, or trying to target Alice with the copy. What is the effect of the copy? So is it 2 damage to Ned, or 2 damage to Alice, which is the target of Ned's choice? Or is it 0 damage to Ned, or 0 damage to Alice, which is the target of Ned's choice? It is 2 damage to a target of Ned's choice, because the copy of the spell is going to remember the additional cost that was paid for the original, which was sacrificing the 2/2 goblin, or 2/2 wolf, the 2/2 creature. So it will use that information for the copy as well. In this case, Alice casts Fire Spout, paying 3 green mana, and Ned uses Reverberate to target Fire Spout. What's the effect of the copy? This time, your choices are 3 damage to each creature with flying, 3 damage to each creature without flying, 3 damage to each creature with flying, and 3 damage to each creature without flying, or 4, no damage to any creature. The answer is no damage to any creature. And the reason is, when you have a spell that was copied but wasn't actually cast, the copy did not have any mana paid for it. So if the game asks what color mana was paid for it, it's going to get an answer of no color of mana was paid for it, because no mana was paid for it. It doesn't matter what was spent on the original spell, because unlike the sacrifice to Flaying, mana is not an object, and the color of a mana that was used to pay for the spell is not a decision that was made when casting the spell. So therefore, the game has no information with the copy of Fire Spell as far as the color of mana, and it will not deal any damage. Any questions? Because if there are no questions, I have a little quiz coming up for you. Yes, it's a pop quiz. So I'm going to put in the information here in the Discord chat. Go to menti.com, put in that code, and you will get into the quiz. I'm going to have the questions on the screen that I'm sharing and also on menti.com. I find that the pictures on Menti are kind of small and hard to read. So if you find that you're having trouble reading the cards on Menti, just look at the screen that I'm sharing. The questions will also be there. I only have 4 people who've joined this quiz so far. Come on, folks, you can do better than that. I'll give you another minute or so. I don't know the answer to that offhand, Ryan. Okay, let's go ahead with our 4-person quiz. If you want to join partway into it, you can do that too. So here's the first question. Um, so 0 is correct. This is the copy of the back side of a transforming double face card, and therefore the copy of it always has a mana value of 0. Here's question number 2. Oh, I didn't. The image that I'm sharing is correct. I forgot to update the Menti.com the Menti.com picture. So it actually is Dax duplicate, and you can ignore Felton the third path. It is a creature bear with haste and dethrone, because the Dax duplicate copy effect added haste and dethrone. It's actually not an artifact. I think that was left over from the Felden version of the question. Here is question 3. So she casts bonus round and casts Blink of an Eye with Kicker. What best describes whether she can pay 1 and a blue for copy? And does she draw as the copy result? So the copy has all the same information as the spell that it is copying. So it knows that Kicker was paid for the original spell, and therefore she's going to draw when the copy resolves. She cannot pay the Kicker though, because she's not casting the spell, and Kicker is paid when you cast the spell. Next question, question 4. Alice controls a 2/2 wolf token, which is enchanted by Imprisoned in the Moon. She plays Vesuva and copies the wolf. What is Vesuva? So, as I mentioned earlier, token is not a copyable value. So even though Vesuva is copying a token, it doesn't become a token. And it is, of course, just a 2/2 creature wolf, because those are the copyable values of the object it's copying. And Imprisoned to the Moon is not a copy effect, so it does not change the wolf's copyable values. And last question. Alice has Doubling Season, casts Nimbus Swimmer with X equals to 2. And then while that's on the stack, she activates Lithoform Engine's last ability to copy the Nimbus Swimmer spell. What token or tokens does she get with Lithoform Engine? The answer is she gets 1 4/4 token. So the reason she gets only 1 token is because Lithoform Engine's ability does not create a token. So Doubling Season is not going to double it because tokens are not being created. But these tokens enter the battlefield with counters. That's part of the resolution of the spell, is that they enter with counters. So because the resolution of the spell is causing them to enter the battlefield with counters, Doubling Season does double the counters. So even though the original spell is cast with X equals to 2, when it enters the battlefield, or when the copy enters the battlefield, they're going to enter with 4 counters. So let's look at the results. Congratulations to Wood. Thank you all for joining me. If you have any further questions, I will still be in the chat for a bit, and you can ask them or type them.